He studied hard. He followed the rules. He stayed humble, worked overtime, paid his dues, smiled when it hurt, and waited patiently for his time to come. He did everything the world told him to do. And still he lost everything. Everything. His job, his relationships, his reputation, his peace of mind, his sense of meaning. And the most haunting part, he didn't fail because he was reckless. He didn't break the rules. He followed them, step by step, just like we were all told to. And yet, the system didn't reward him. It broke him. Now, pause for a second and really ask yourself, what does it mean to do everything right if the outcome is still ruin? That's not just a cautionary tale. That's a philosophical earthquake. Because if the formulas we're taught don't work, if the path we're sold leads to a cliff, then what is our responsibility? To keep walking, or to start questioning?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
That's the journey we're going to take together right now. A journey that doesn't just challenge the idea of success, it challenges the entire architecture of meaning we've been taught to believe in. Because this is not about one man. This is about all of us. We are all that man. We've all played the game. We've all sacrificed something real for something promised. And many of us are starting to wonder, what if the promise was a lie? Let's go deeper. From a young age, most of us are handed a silent contract. It says, if you behave, if you conform, if you delay gratification, if you sacrifice your instincts and follow the script, we will reward you with happiness, stability, love, purpose, and meaning. But there's a catch: they never let you read the fine print. Because the truth is, that contract has no guarantees. It's built on assumptions, not truth. And this is where the first philosophical fracture begins. Because what happens when a man honors that contract with his entire life and it still fails him? He experiences something that philosophers have wrestled with for centuries: moral tragedy. But the kind of tragedy that doesn't come from vice, but from virtue. He becomes the modern job. Not punished for his sins, but seemingly punished for his obedience. And this shakes the foundation of how meaning works. Because if doing everything right doesn't protect you, then what is right really grounded in? The Stoics warned us about this. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and one of the most powerful men in history, wrote in his private journals, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He knew that virtue was not a currency to buy reward, it was an end in itself. But how many of us have been taught that? How many of us pursue virtue as a means to an outcome instead of as the outcome itself? This is where the system breaks us. It doesn't just lie to us, it trains us to lie to ourselves. It teaches us to make sacrifices not out of wisdom, but out of fear. It tells us to suppress our desires, delay our dreams, tolerate disrespect, embrace suffering not because it's noble, but because eventually we'll be allowed to live. But what if eventually never comes? What if the reward isn't real? What if the only thing we're guaranteed is this moment right now? Here's the hard truth. Many men are waking up and realizing they gave the best years of their lives to a promise that was never real. They were told to be loyal to corporations that replaced them like spare parts. They were told to endure marriages that drained them of vitality. They were told to trust governments that exploited their trust. They were told to believe in systems that benefit from their obedience but never return the favor. And now that they've lost everything, they're starting to ask the question that should terrify every institution: what if I was never supposed to win? What happens when a man comes face to face with that question? At first, there's despair, because the illusion of control is shattered. He realizes that he wasn't the architect of his life, he was a tenant in someone else's structure. But a structure designed to extract labor, time, attention, and obedience, all in exchange for empty symbols of success. But that despair, if he stays with it, begins to transform. It becomes clarity. Because when everything is stripped away, what's left is the truth. And truth is the birthplace of power. He begins to see that loss is not the end, it's the reset. It's the clearing of the false, the pruning of dead branches, and the collapse of illusions. And in that space, he asks a terrifying but liberating question: what if I start living by my own code? Not the code I was taught, not the code that earns applause, but the code that aligns with my soul. This is where philosophy becomes action. Because it's not enough to see the lie, you have to stop living it. You have to build a new structure. One that isn't dependent on outcomes. One that doesn't collapse when the system withdraws its approval. One that is rooted in truth, clarity, and courage. So what does that look like practically? It means redefining success not as achievement, but as alignment. It means asking daily, am I living in truth? Am I acting from fear or from integrity? Am I chasing approval, or am I honoring what I know is real? It means finding joy in simplicity, peace in the present, power in restraint. It means creating your own rituals, your own philosophy, your own system of meaning, not one inherited, one forged. It also means letting go of false debts. You don't owe your life to a system that discarded you. You don't owe loyalty to narratives that betrayed you. You owe your life to life itself, to the people you love, to the truth inside you. That's it. Everything else is noise. And yes, it's lonely. At first. Because when you stop playing the game, the crowd keeps running without you. They mock you. They question you. They say you're bitter, lost, rebellious. But they're still asleep, still sedated by the dream, still hoping the system will notice their good behavior, and maybe one day they'll wake up too. Or maybe they won't, but that's not your concern anymore. Your concern is truth. Your concern is building something real. So ask yourself, right now, if I lost everything tomorrow, what would still be mine? Would you still have your mind, your clarity, your soul? Would you still have the respect of the person in the mirror? Would you still be proud of how you lived, even if no one else ever applauded? Because that is the test. That is the measure of a man, not how much he wins, but whether he stays true when he loses, whether he can still love, still create, still serve, still stand, even when the world turns its back. And somewhere in this world, maybe even right now, there's a man watching this who's lost everything, who did everything right, and still got crushed. To you, I say this: you are not broken. You are not cursed. You are not alone. You are standing at the edge of something sacred, something very few ever reach, the edge of radical freedom. You can either fall into despair or you can build from the ashes. This is your moment, not to be saved, but to rise, not to wait for justice, but to become sovereign, not to chase meaning, but to create it. Shu. Because the most powerful transformation a man can undergo is not when he wins the game, it's when he refuses to play a rigged one and builds his own instead. The sacred collapse. Why losing everything can be the most honest thing that ever happens to you. There's a strange kind of truth that only shows itself when your world falls apart. A sacred clarity that emerges not when life is going well, not when you're being rewarded, but when the system you trusted crumbles beneath your feet and you're left standing in the wreckage with nothing but your breath and your awareness. That moment when everything you built is gone and all that's left is the raw you isn't just rock bottom. It's a doorway. And the reason it hurts so much is because lies hurt when they leave the body. The pain of loss is not just about what you no longer have, it's also the pain of realizing that what you thought was real never truly was. You see, when you lose everything, you don't just lose comfort, you lose illusion. And that's where the sacred begins, because most people never get there. Most people spend their entire lives maintaining illusions so carefully crafted that even they believe them. They wear the mask until the mask becomes their identity. They chase after approval until it becomes their god. They confuse routine with meaning, applause with purpose, and comfort with peace. But when you lose everything, all of that is stripped away. And what's left is truth in its purest form. And here's where it gets paradoxical sometimes. The collapse is the cure. Not because it feels good, but because it burns away everything false. It's the fire that reveals what's indestructible. And if you can sit in that fire, if you can resist the urge to numb it, escape it, or rush back into another illusion, you will find something that can't be taken from you. You will find you. But let's not romanticize suffering. Not all pain is sacred. Some pain is just chaos. Some collapse is just destruction. So what separates ruin from revelation? The answer is attention. It's not what happens to you, it's how you interpret what happens. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote, "In some way, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Meaning doesn't erase pain. Meaning transforms it. It gives it shape. It gives it direction. It turns collapse into a calling. So when you lose everything, when the job is gone, the relationship is gone, the identity is gone, you have a choice. You can ask, why me? Or you can ask, what is this trying to show me? Because maybe what you lost was never truly yours. Maybe the thing you were clinging to was the very thing blocking your growth. Maybe the system that rejected you was never worthy of your energy to begin with. Maybe you were trying to win a game that was designed to keep you small. And maybe, just maybe, the collapse wasn't a punishment, it was an initiation. Let's take this deeper. There's an ancient archetype found in myths, religions, and stories across cultures called the descent. It's the moment when the hero falls. He loses everything. He's betrayed, ruined, cast out. He enters the underworld, the cave, the wilderness. And in that darkness, he meets himself. He confronts his shadow. He faces the parts of himself that were hidden under success and status. And only after that descent, only after walking through hell, does he emerge with wisdom. Why does that story repeat in every culture? Because it's true. Spiritually, psychologically, existentially, collapse is not the end. It's the middle. It's the sacred unraveling that makes true transformation possible. So let me ask you, what have you been clinging to that was never really yours? What identity, what title, what relationship, what dream? Are you willing to let it die not because you failed, but because you've grown past it? Because here's the truth, some things must be lost for the soul to breathe. And some men don't wake up until everything false has been stripped away. There's a quiet power in that kind of man. He no longer needs to be impressive. He no longer needs to be praised. He no longer needs to be understood, because he's met himself in the fire. And once you've met the part of you that survives collapse, you stop being afraid of losing things. You no longer negotiate your integrity to keep the peace. You no longer betray your soul for a paycheck. You no longer chase comfort like it's salvation, because you know who you are now, and you earned that knowing. Let's be practical for a moment. What does it look like to live from that place? It means you start building your life not from fear, but from truth. You stop asking, what's the safest choice? And start asking, what's the most honest choice? You stop trying to fit in and start trying to become real. You stop outsourcing your worth to systems, algorithms, or institutions and start building your own rhythm, your own code, your own philosophy. You also realize something else. You don't need to rebuild the same life. Most people, after loss, try to recreate the exact structure they had before. Same job, same habits, same goals. But what if that structure was the problem? What if the loss was an opportunity to create something better than before? Not bigger, not louder, but truer, more aligned, more honest, more yours. You may lose money, you may lose status, you may lose people. But what you gain if you stay awake is a kind of sovereignty that can't be bought. A kind of authority that doesn't come from titles, but from truth lived deeply. And that kind of man, he becomes a lighthouse. He becomes the rare one who doesn't just survive collapse, he transcends it. And when he speaks, people listen. Not because he's loud, but because you can feel the fire he walked through in every word he says. So if you've lost everything, if the collapse is here or on the horizon, don't run from it. Don't numb it. Don't distract yourself. Sit inside it. Breathe through it. Let it show you what's real. Let it strip away what's false. Let it reveal your essence. Because this kind of loss, when interpreted correctly, is not devastation, it's liberation. It's the shedding of skins that were never truly yours. It's the sacred collapse that makes space for something undeniably true to rise. And here's one final question to sit with. If you were given the gift of starting over completely, what would you build differently this time? Would you chase the same dreams? Would you keep the same habits? Would you follow the same rules? Or would you live with the clarity of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to express? The man who rebuilt from ashes, how loss creates a new kind of power the system can't understand. There's a moment after the collapse, after the silence, after the grief, when something stirs in the ashes. It's not loud. It doesn't declare itself. It doesn't come with a plan or a strategy. It's a feeling, a whisper, a pulse. And if you're still, If you've stayed with yourself through the fire, you'll recognize it for what it is: rebirth. Not a return to who you were, but the beginning of who you were meant to become. This is the moment where philosophy stops being theory and starts becoming practice. Because now there's no system to lean on, no applause, no external validation, just you and truth. And what you begin to realize is that the power you're building now isn't the kind of power the system understands or can even measure. It's not about control, not about dominance, not about how many people clap when you walk in the room. It's something deeper, something older, a kind of inner authority that comes from knowing, not believing, knowing that you can lose everything and still remain whole. But that kind of man doesn't need to raise his voice. He doesn't need to prove anything. His life becomes his proof. His actions become his voice. His presence becomes his philosophy. But let's be clear, this new power comes with a cost. Because once you've walked through collapse, once you've rebuilt from nothing, you can no longer lie to yourself. You can't pretend to admire things you don't respect. You can't pretend to believe in things you no longer trust. You can't go back to small talk, shallow goals, or hollow ambition. You've tasted something too real, and once you've tasted real, everything else feels artificial. That's the curse and the gift of awakening. So what does it mean to rebuild from ashes? It means you no longer build for approval. You build for alignment. You create a life that doesn't just look good on the outside, but feels right on the inside. You stop chasing success in the way the system defines it and start designing your own definition. Maybe it's simplicity, maybe it's depth, maybe it's a quiet life with no audience, but with honor. Maybe it's a mission that no one understands but you pursue it with such clarity that the world eventually has no choice but to notice. You also begin to relate to others differently. You stop trying to save people who don't want to be saved. You stop begging for understanding. You stop explaining your worth. Because you know deep down that anyone who hasn't walked through fire can't possibly understand the man who has. And that's okay. You don't need them to. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be true. And something else happens, something subtle but profound. You begin to see how fragile the system really is. Not just economically or politically, but philosophically. You see how much of the world is built on performance, fear, image, and distraction. And instead of fighting it, you do something far more potent. You stop participating in the lie. You stop feeding the machine with your attention, your energy, your time. And in doing so, you become free from its gravity. And this is where you stop being just a survivor and become a leader. Not in the traditional sense, not in titles or companies or social media metrics, but in the truest sense of the word, someone who lives so fully in alignment with truth that others start to question their own illusions. Someone who shows, not tells. Someone whose life becomes a lighthouse not because he sought to inspire others, but because he refused to betray himself. Now, I want to ask you something that could change your life. If you were to rebuild your life entirely from truth, not from fear, not from ego, not from expectation, but from truth, what would you let go of? What would you stop pretending to care about? What would you finally start doing, saying, building, and being? Because that's the real test. Not whether you can survive collapse, but whether you can rebuild without recreating the same prison. whether you can resist the temptation to fill the void with more of what broke you, whether you can choose depth over distraction, truth over comfort, freedom over familiarity. And if you dare to rebuild from that place, what you create won't just be new. It will be sacred, because it will be born from reality, not illusion, from soul, not strategy, from principle, not popularity. And that kind of life, it can't be taken from you, because you didn't borrow it from the system. You forged it in the fire. So here we are, at the end of a story that most people never tell. Not the story of the man who won everything, but the story of the man who lost everything and in doing so found a power that no one could ever take from him again. He did everything right and still lost everything. But that loss, that sacred collapse, it turned him into something the system can't predict, control, or replace. It turned him into a man who is finally, fully, unshakably alive.